nga aldaw, Pilipinas. Magandang araw, Department of Education. Ako po si Elaine, Division Information Officer ng Baguio City at narito po tayo para sa ating EduAKSYON, Aksyon at Solusyon para sa Edukasyon. A DepEd Virtual Press Conference upang mapag-usapan ang mahalagang balita at impormasyon. At ngayon, ating aalamin ang latest news and developments, particular ngayong linggo dito sa DepEd Cordillera.
Magandang araw po, ako naman si Frank Lloyd de Guzman mula sa DepEd TV at Baguio Central School. Binabati ko po ang lahat na nakasubaybay sa ating official DepEd Facebook pages, ang DepEd Philippines at DepEd Tayo Cordillera Facebook page. Pagbati rin sa ating mga learners, parents, and teachers mula Luzon, Visayas at Mindanao. Kasabay nga ng pagbibigay ng latest developments sa ating stakeholders and media friends tungkol sa implementasyon ng limited face-to-face classes at mahahalagang usaping pang-edukasyon. Makakasama rin natin ang ina ng ating kagawaran, Kalihim Leonor Magtolis Briones.
At of course, sasamahan din tayo ng ating mga undersecretaries at assistant secretaries na sila Undersecretary Nepomuceno Malaluan, Undersecretary Wilfredo Cabral at Assistant Secretary Malcolm Garma. And from the Cordillera Administrative Region, kasama po natin si Regional Director Estela P. Leon Carino, Assistant Regional Director Florante E. Vergara at ang ating mga Schools Division Superintendent and Assistant Schools Division Superintendents from the Schools Division Offices of Abra, Apayao, Baguio City, Benguet, Ifugao, Kalinga, Mountain Province, and Tabuk City.
Samahan niyo po kami ngayong araw upang alamin ang mga aksyon at himayin ang mga solusyon para sa ating sektor. Ito ang EduAKSYON,
Aksyon at solusyon para sa edukasyon. Palagi nating nababanggit at ipinapaalala na education is a shared responsibility. At dahil sa ating shared responsibility at pagbabayanihan, pati na rin ang tulong ng iba't ibang sektor ng pamahalaan na ipagpapatuloy ng Department of Education ang edukasyon ng bawat kabataang Pilipino sa gitna ng pandemya.
Makalipas ang halos 2 taon ng ating mag-aaral sa ilalim ng distance learning ay isang katuparan para sa kagawaran ang implementasyon ng limited face-to-face classes. Nakakatuwang makita ang ngiti sa mata ng mga bata habang sila ay pumapasok sa paaralan at nasa loob ng silid-aralan. Sa panibagong simula at muling pagtanggap natin sa ating mga mahal na mag-aaral sa paaralan, ay alamin natin ang mga naging hakbang at ginagawa pa ng Kagawaran dito sa DepEd Card. Panoorin natin ang video na ito.
Napakahalaga ng face-to-face dahil I've been in the service for 26 years and I've been handling youngest learners for 17 years and I can really see the difference. For almost 2 years na naka-online yung mga bata, hindi ko na-apply yung mga strategies na ginagawa ko in order for them to read and write yung mga basic na skills na kailangan nila so that when they go to the higher grades, mas madali.
it's COVID-19. You know about COVID-19, right? So that's why we're a bit far away from each other. So how do you protect also your classmates from getting COVID-19?
Social distancing. And no sharing things with classmates. But diba when we went to school, it's always there are two beside us. But now there's none now because COVID-19 is here, and we might infect the people that are coming here.
So what do you miss about face-to-face classes?
About learning in school and like reading, counting, or whatever.
Panood? Ayan. Gaya po ng inyong napanood, ang ligtas at maayos na implementasyon ng BELCP at ng face-to-face classes dito sa Rehiyong Cordillera ay bunga ng pagbabayanihan para sa edukasyon ng bawat sektor.
Kaya naman partner, tuloy-tuloy ang edukasyon ng bawat kabataang Pilipino dahil sa pagkakaisa at sa hindi matatawarang dedikasyon ng ating mga education frontliners.
At syempre, ang mga effort ng mga learners na patuloy na binubuo ang kanilang mga pangarap. At of course, sa mga magulang na tunay na nagpapatibay sa pundasyon ng kanilang mga pangarap at ng mga iba pang education advocates na katuwang natin para sa katuparan ng ating mga hakbangin.
Sa pagkakataong ito, pakinggan naman natin ang mensahe ng ating Regional Director at ang pangkahalatang idea ng face-to-face implementation dito sa Cordillera. Naimbag nga aldaw, RD Estela Carino.
Naimbag nga aldaw, Cordillera. Maptang dyan agsapason si katayon amin. That's our dialect. Good morning, Pilipinas. It is our utmost privilege to host this week's EduAKSYON, our press conference with our dear Secretary, Ma'am Kalihim Briones. Indeed, it is our region's pleasure to have with us our dear Secretary, Ma'am Kalihim, who has now a native name of Licania, and our dear DepEd EXICO members who are physically present as well as online today. Of course, with us here now is ASEC Malcolm Garma. We will be joined by Undersecretary Nepomuceno Malaluan. Virtually, Undersecretary Wilfredo Cabral and I think USEC Sevilla. We consider ourselves lucky here in the Cordillera region because we are not only hosting this press conference, but also hosting this month's National Management Committee meeting with most of our participants physically present. This goes to show we are already on the road to recovery from this pandemic. To our listeners and viewers via our official social media pages across the nation, may the warmth and hospitality of the Cordillera region reach you and be with you as we give you updates and important news from our basic education department. Again, naimbag nga agsapa, and mabuhay Cordillera, mabuhay Pilipinas, mabuhay DepEd.
Maraming salamat po Regional Director Estela Leon Carino sa inyong mainit na pagbati at sa mga latest updates sa estado ng edukasyon sa ating rehiyon. Tunay nga na ang pagkakaroon natin ng isang ligtas na pagbabalik eskwela sa gitna ng pandemya at ang tuloy-tuloy na pagkatuto ng ating mga mag-aaral ay bunga ng pagtutulungan at masusing pagpaplano ng Kagawaran ng Edukasyon mula sa Central Office hanggang sa ating mga field offices. Maliban sa regional updates na ating nakita at napakinggan, ngayong araw din ay ating malalaman ang ilang updates mula sa ating Central Office.
Tama po yan, Miss Elaine. So maliban sa report mula sa ating rehiyon at ang presensya ng ating mahal na kalihim, makakasama rin natin ang pangalawang kalihim upang bigyan tayo ng impormasyon tungkol sa mga developments at mga iba pang programs and projects ng DepEd. Ayan. At ngayon, para bigyan tayo ng updates kaugnay sa appointment ng mga third-level officials at seso ng Kagawaran, makakasama natin ngayong araw si Undersecretary for Human Resource and Organizational Development, Undersecretary Wilfredo Cabral.
Magandang umaga, Sir Will.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Lalo ulit sa ating kalihim ng Kagawaran ng Edukasyon, Honorable Secretary Leonor Magtolis Briones, sa mga miyembro ng Aksyon at Mangkong, at lahat po ng nakatutok sa ating virtual space watching this EduAKSYON at Baguio City. I am honored and privileged to share with you the updates or some statistics on the appointment, promotion, and rank adjustments of our third-level officials in the Department of Education. We would like to highlight that one of the significant developments in leadership, under the leadership of our Secretary Briones, is on empowering local and field officials in the management of their affairs, making decisions at some parochial concerns and all of those internal affairs. So with that, the appointment and promotion and rank adjustment of our third-level officials have taken an unprecedented number, owing to the fact that such empowerment is not simply on making that authority visible, but also ensuring that they are given the appropriate position that is commensurate to their qualifications. So on the next slide, you will see the appointment and promotion of those who have been appointed, promoted to a higher position, and seasonal appointment or adjustment. So comparatively, on the next slide, you will see that from 2016, on the next slide please, to 2022, which is under the leadership of Secretary Briones, we have 8 undersecretaries who have been promoted, assistant secretaries 10, and CO directors, Bureau on Services, we have 8, also director 3, 6, and 13 regional directors for the period 2016-2022, 121 schools division superintendent, and 200 assistant schools division superintendent. We would like to clarify that this appointment and promotion, as I mentioned earlier, is because of that commitment na ang ating lahat ng mga third-level officials ay mabigyan ng pagkakataon na may sagawa ang kanilang tungkulin at may kaakibat na station and compensation as well. So this is based on the Republic Act 9155, otherwise known as the Governance of Basic Education Act of 2001, which the Secretary is given the authority to create a selection and promotions board for the third level which shall formulate and implement a system of promotion for bureaus, service directors, regional directors, assistant regional directors, schools division superintendents, and assistant schools division superintendents. On the next slide, while we were able to see the total, this is a lot higher from the administration and the previous years, and by the assistant superintendents alone, we have appointed or appointments 75 higher. And while in the 2010 to 2016, we would like to highlight that the face-to-face screening interview was done, and there's of course a determination of the quorum composed of majority of 4 members, that includes the chairman and the members. And we would like to highlight that during that time, it was the policy of the department that no ARD and SDS shall be promoted in his or current region, division of assignment, respectively. And on the next slide, we have a total of 154 appointments for the year 2022, 25 last year, 2021, and on 2020 we have 14. Significantly, we noticed that from 2016, which is the start of the present administration, 300 secretaries were appointed, 4 assistant secretaries, and for a total of 7. For 2017, there has been a significant number of designated SDS, ASDSs, and this has been addressed such that we shifted to a virtual screening committee interview for 2020 to 2022, and that is because of the pandemic, while at the early part of 2019 and 2018 we continued on face-to-face screening, and we also follow the established rules of having a quorum by a majority of 5 members present, and that includes the chairman and the members. One of the significant highlights is that the policy that no ARD or ASDS, SDS shall be promoted in his or her current region or division of assignment respectively was repealed by Department Order number 16 series of 2019. And in terms of rank appointment, the next slide show the rank adjustment from CESO 6 to 5 to 4 up to the highest, which is CESO 1. And you will notice that there are a lot of appointees or rank adjustment made, and this is also based on the CESB Resolution 1516-A series 2019, which is the revised omnibus policies on rank appointment in the Federal Executive Service. And officials who were adjusted to a higher rank. All of these were submitted to the CES board with the corresponding secretary's endorsement. If you look at the appointment to CES rank from 2016 to 2022, we have a total of 65 third-level officials appointed to CESO 1, we have 2 for 2022. CESO 2, we have also 2. And for CESO 3, we have a total of 7. And for CESO 4, we have 3. CESO 5, we have 27. And for CESO 6, 24. All of them were given their corresponding appointment as to rank adjustment, and the same will be submitted to the CES board. So I'd like to express our thanks to the Secretary for providing this opportunity to all our third level officials to really exercise the duties and function, and of course making sure that they are given due recognition and appropriate compensation on the responsibilities that they are taking as a third level officials. Sa inyo pong lahat, this is a simple statistics that show how responsive the department has been, and nobody from among the third level officials has been neglected as to their movement in their ranks and in their career as public servants. Thank you very much, and good morning to one and all.
Maraming salamat, Yusek Willie Cabral.
O, ayan. So partner, sa tingin mo kailan kaya tayo ma-appoint bilang third level official ng DepEd?
Aba, dahil sa update ni Yusek Willie, malamang malapit-lapit na.
Siguro nga
Kasi
talaga
parang
malapit-lapit,
napapadali
no,
eh,
diba?
tama? Oo. So para naman magbigay din ng updates on the expansion of face-to-face classes, i-welcome din po natin ang ating DepEd Assistant Secretary for National Academy of Sports and Field Operations, Assistant Secretary Malcolm Garma. Magandang umaga, Asek Garma.
Okay. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Magandang umaga, Secretary Liling. And to our media partners here in the Cordillera Autonomous Region, at Cordillera Administrative Region, thank you for hosting our EduAKSYON for this week, RD Stella. For today, we will be providing you with some updates on the implementation of our progressive expansion of the limited face-to-face. But like what we did last week, we will just be providing some general highlights of our updates and provide you with some numbers. Then later, during our question and answer, we'll be responding to the questions as raised by our media partners. So if we are ready with the slide, please, for the PowerPoint. Okay. So again, we would like to emphasize that we are presenting, we have adopted the presentation of what we call as quick count to our media partners and also to the members of the management committee. Quick count kasi gusto natin i-reflect, no, yung actual numbers coming from the regions. Because as we have mentioned in previous press conferences, that the authority to assess and select the schools that can participate in our limited face-to-face has already been devolved to our regional directors. So as such, we would like to get the numbers direct from the regions. However, we need to validate, no, and put some corrections on the numbers. But nevertheless, what we provide you are the actual numbers that come from our regional offices through our planning officers and our data teams. So based on the quick count that we have as of March 22, there is already a total of 14,396 public and private schools submitted by the regions that are considered as nominated. So ulitin po natin para po sa kapakanan at kaalaman ng ating mga partners in media, pag sinabi po nating nominated school, ito po yung mga schools that have already undergone and qualified, no? Insofar as our school safety assessment tool is concerned. So ito po yung mga nakapasa na doon sa ating school safety assessment tool. These schools may or may not have yet, no, the LGU concurrence, which is one of our important requirements for a school to start a limited face-to-face. So ito po yung nominated schools, and of these nominated schools, it was reported to us that there are already 2,600,773 learners that are participating, no, in these nominated schools. Okay. Now, of that number of 14,396 schools, 9,994 public schools and 212 private schools are already in the participating level. Ang ibig po sabihin ng participating naman, ito po yung mga schools, nominated schools, that are now under alert levels 1 or 2. So ito po yung pwede na magbukas. In fact, marami po dyan ay nakapagbukas na o nakapagsimula na ng kanilang limited face-to-face classes. So the total of this participating school, of that 14,396 nominated schools, is 10,196 schools. Okay. Can we go to the next slide, please? So these are just the breakdown of what we got from the regional offices, no? So makikita po natin dyan, since this is a regional conference hosted by the by DepEd CAR, would like to highlight, no, the numbers coming from CAR. So as of March 22, ay meron na pong 1,165 nominated schools coming from CAR. But after my update, we will be turning over the microphone also to RD Stella for her to give naman the specific updates coming from CAR. Kasi baka mas bago pa yung update ni RD Stella. And I'm sure our media partners from the region would be very much interested in knowing the numbers also from CAR. Okay, next slide please. Okay, so ito po yung learners, breakdown of the number of learners per region. Okay, next slide please. And ito po yung mga nabanggit ko kanina, the breakdown of the regional breakdown of the participating schools. Okay, next slide. I think that's the last slide. Okay. Okay, just to compare the increase in the number, no. In our March 17 update, in terms of the number of nominated schools, we had 14,350. Now we already had 14,396. But again, we would like to emphasize that we are still in the process of looking at the numbers in terms of the correctness, no, of the entry. Hindi ibig sabihin ito mali kasi galing na ito sa region. So kino-correct lang natin, yung iba kasi minsan nagkakamali doon sa school ID number, may mga double entry, mga ganun lang, but we already considered this as part of our statistics, no, in terms of the number of schools that are already ready for limited face-to-face. So there is also an increase in the number of learners, no, from the nominated schools, and also an increase in the number of participating schools because as we know that there are more areas now that are under alert levels 1 and 2. So pwede na mag-start yan anytime as long as meron na rin concurrence ang ating mga local government units, and of course the schools have secured the consent of the parents of those learners who will be participating in our limited face-to-face classes. And again, just to anticipate the perennial question of our media partners and other stakeholders, requirement ba ang vaccination among learners? We have already emphasized that it's not. But we prefer that our learners are vaccinated. And this is also in support of the government's program on pediatric vaccination. So we prefer that our learners are vaccinated when they participate in our limited face-to-face classes. And of course, para na rin sa proteksyon, no, ng ating mga mag-aaral. And in terms of teachers, definitely the teachers must be vaccinated, especially those who will handle our limited face-to-face classes. And at this point, we are also awaiting for several policy issuances, one of which is the final guidelines on the granting of the safety seal. Kung napansin po ninyo, most of the establishments right now have this what they call as a safety seal, no? Doon po sa kanilang mga harapan ng mga establishments nila. So even our schools will have this seal. And what is different is that hindi na po kailangan ibang agency ang mag-grant ng ating safety seal because it will be DepEd who will already grant the safety seal following our guideline. So yung mga schools that have already complied with the school safety assessment tool ay automatic mabibigyan na po sila or eligible na sila for the conferment of a safety seal. Kasi minsan hinahanap din ng LGU natin yung safety seal. So yun na yung ipoprovide natin. At this point, I think at this moment, today, our safety seal team is also meeting for the rollout of the ICT-based coding o yung ang tawag doon, yung QR coding. Yan. So, tinuturuan na sila ngayon how to generate the QR coding as part of the safety seal mechanism. Another policy issuance that we are also waiting is the finalization of our joint memorandum circular with DOH, which we have already submitted the draft. And that is just awaiting the signature, the approval and signature of our two secretaries, no? The Department of Education and Department of Health secretaries. There were some adjustments made in the joint memorandum circular in response na rin doon sa mga natutunan natin in the pilot study. And accordingly, yung ating ding guidelines, no? Yung final guidelines natin on the limited face-to-face is also being finalized because we have already adjusted some of the policy stipulation so that it will be more relevant to our current situation. Relevant to the current situation, but at the same time, hindi naman static but dynamic to adapt to whatever possible situation that might arise insofar as the COVID-19 is concerned. And lastly, we are also finalizing the version 2 of our school safety assessment tool. So in our version 2, the revised version of the school safety assessment tool, mas pinadali natin. We have streamlined already the requirements na nakita natin doon sa version 1 because what we learned from the pilot school implementation ay maraming school ang nahihirapan to comply with the safety assessment tool kasi either marami siya, yung iba hindi practical. So in the version 2, which hopefully will come up within the week or latest by next week, ay medyo pinadali na natin. And because of this, we are expecting that more schools will qualify to become nominated schools. And in support to the compliance of our schools, it was reported in our last press conference by Yusek Ann Sevilla that we have already downloaded almost 1 billion in terms of additional MOE to our regions to help our schools, especially yung mga maliliit na schools natin, for them to be able to comply with the requirements of our either version 1 or version 2. So ang tanong, yung bang nag-undergo na ng version 1 SSAT ay kailangan pang mag-undergo nung version 2. No more. Mas mahigpit nga yung version 1 eh. So, hindi na kailangan umulit yung mga schools na na-assess nyo na. So, at this point, we will be turning over the microphone and the screen to RD Stella Carino for the further details, no, on the updates insofar as the DepEd car is concerned. So, we will be happy to answer your questions later on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Asek Malcolm. Once again, good morning, Ma'am Liling. Good morning to everyone. So, as you have seen on screen, the original number of schools that applied for CAR is 1,164. But as for the data on how many are really having the actual face-to-face class, that would be less than the ones which applied, because as mentioned by Asik Malcolm, they will still have to comply with the required under the SSAT. So as of now, I have the slide on screen that shows the number of schools implementing limited face-to-face classes for school year yan. So 2021-2022. So out of the supposed 1,165, we only have 1,044, no, of which 22 come from the private school, no, and of course many of these are from the elementary, no, 812, and then secondary 202, and then 30 integrated schools. So these are now the ones implementing the limited face-to-face, although they did not, of course, start on the same date. And the enrollment of those 1,044 attending the face-to-face is 146,000. And out of the enrollment in the public, which is 365,565. So as to the number of schools implementing, we already reach 87.15% of the total schools. But as to the enrollment, we did not yet reach 50% of the total 365,000 schools, meaning the others are still doing the modality. Of course, the number, the highest percentage that is now implementing, they surpassed their target. They targeted 258 schools supposed to be implementing the face-to-face, but they surpassed that. That's 267. And 10 private schools, a total of 277 schools, and that is Mountain Province. That's why they have 107% on 36 schools implementing the limited face-to-face. And this is followed by Ifugao, no, that targeted 243, and the schools implementing now is also 243, so that's 100%. By the way, Mountain Province, of course, is headed by SDS Sali Ulalim, and Ifugao is headed by the OIC SDS Soraya Fakulu. And then this is followed by Benguet, no, they targeted 373, and we have the total schools implementing, which is 371. So that's almost 100% under the leadership of SDS Glo Buyao, and actually they are here. And next to this would be Kalinga, no, which 59 target, and then they have 54 actual implementation. Then that's followed by Tabuk City with 80.23%. SDO Kalinga is headed by SDS Amador, and Tabuk City is headed by SDS Irene, no? Sila po yung mga bagong appointees under our Secretary, Ma'am Liling, and of course under our President. And then we know that while Baguio City is under level 1, we have 21%, no, of the schools still implementing, although they targeted 47, still only 10 are implementing face-to-face. So hopefully by next week, no, because I think most of the schools are now given safety seal, then they will have more. Abra had 57 schools before, but as you can see, they are now the lowest as to the actual implementation, no, because of the executive of the local government that requires total vaccination of teachers with booster, and of also of the learners. So that's why, as mentioned by ASIC Garma, the concurrence of the local government is very important, and that's why they only have 8.77%. But as I said, total of CAR, we surpassed the 50%. Face-to-face, we have 87.15%. So that is the detail for DepEd CAR. Thank you.
So, maraming salamat, Asik Garma. And of course, sa ating Regional Director, Estela Carino, sa mga tips po na sa ating expansion ng limited face-to-face classes. Sana nga po ay unti-unti na dadami ang mga schools na kasama sa limited face-to-face, hindi ba, partner?
Tama, lalo na sa ating updates mula sa Assistant Secretary Garma na padadaliin daw po ang ating school assessment para sa ating limited face-to-face paglabas po ng second version ng tool na ito. At magandang balita din mula sa kanya na narinig ko kanina na hindi na muling manggagaling sa DILG ang safety seal, kundi DepEd na mismo ang magbibigay nito. So sana nga po dito sa DepEd Cordillera, makamit natin ang 100% target natin para sa school opening ng face-to-face classes.
Okay, tsaka alam mo ba, partner, nasaksihan ko rin noon na mga pagpasok na ating mga mag-aaral sa limited face-to-face. Kasi marami din ako nang nakikita sa ating mga sa mga photos, and of course, marami rin akong mga dadaanan na talaga naman excited ng ating mga mag-aaral na bumalik din. And sana nga magtuloy na itong kumbaga face-to-face classes na sa ganun ay mas maligaya na, di ba? Kaya binabati rin po natin ang ating hundreds of Facebook Live viewers na nakatutok rin sa DepEd Philippines Facebook page, at patuloy nyo po mag-subscribe and mag-share and follow also our DepEd Tayo page Cordillera, hindi ba? Kaya yun, so kaya patuloy natin suportahan po ang ating EduAKSYON, hindi ba, partner?
Tama, around more than 600 viewers po tayo ngayon live. Alright, Sir Frank?
Okay. So, syempre kami rin po ay nagpapasalamat kay Yusek Wilfredo Cabral at maya-maya lamang ay antabayanan po natin dahil magbibigay din ng reports si Yusek Nepomuceno Malaluan. Okay.
Alright, ano pa ba ang aabangan natin ngayong umaga? Okay, so sa puntong ito, atin pong panoorin ang maikling intermission mula sa Baguio City National High School, SDO Baguio.
Sa pagtatapos ng ating paglalakbay, puso't isip natin ay tinanday. Bagamat tayo'y magkahiwa-hiwalay, karunungay mabibigyan pa rin ng kulay.
Sa panibagong ito na ating haharapin, gamitin natin kalunungang pabaon sa atin. Tumagasama ng hamong patuloy sa paggusto, kakayanin natin mapagtagumpayan.
Anumang pagsubok ang lalayakin, anumang taong kahakit ay sabay-sabay lalakbayin. Hindi titigil, mga ngarap pa rin, tagumpay ay patuloy na aawin. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Whoa, whoa. Yeah, yeah, yeah. sa aming ka-eskwela at mga kaibigan.
Kasabay na hubog, pagkatao at karunungan.
Ating mga huntahan, tawanan at iyakan, kailanman hindi malilimutan. Anumang pagsubok ang lalayagin, anumang damdamin ay sabay-sabay lalakbayin. Hindi titigil, mangangarap pa rin, tagumpay ay patuloy na awitin. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, oh. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Aming guro sa amin laging gumagabay.
Mga magulang namin, minamahal kami ng tunay. Mula sa puso kami, sa iyo'y nagbibigay pugay. Salamat! 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 Pagkat pangarap ay abot kamay.
Anumang pagsubok ang lalayagin, anumang damdamin ay sabay-sabay lalakbayin. Hindi titigil, mangangarap pa rin, tagumpay ay patuloy. Anumang pagsubok ang lalayagin, anumang damdamin ay sabay-sabay lalakbayin. Hindi titigil, mangangarap pa rin, tagumpay ay patuloy. Tagumpay ay patuloy na awitin. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, oh. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, oh. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tagumpay ay patuloy na awitin.
Bida, bida, bida kid! Ikaw at ako ang bida kid. Sa COVID di patataig, sa ligtas na pagbabalik, sama-sama maging bida kid. Sa bahay, bida kid! Kumain ng masustansya, uminom ng vitamina. Kung pakiramdam ay hindi maganda, sabihin sa magulang at sa bahay muna. Sa kalye, bida kid! Best friend natin ang mask, suotin kahit saan. Ingatan ang kamay, maghugas pag galing sa labas. Sa school, be the kid. Sa pila, wag dikit-dikit, dumistansya para iwas sakit. Laging open ang window para maganda ang airflow. 3B's, tandaan, bakuna, bayanihan, be the kid. Halina't magtulungan. Ikaw at ako ang be the kid. Sa COVID di patataig, sa ligtas na pagbabalik, sama-sama maging be the kid.
Tunay ngang nakakagalak ang Bida Kid gaya ng intermission ng ating mga learners mula sa Baguio City National High School. Naalala ko tuloy nung ako ay high school dyan sa Baguio City High, my alma mater, we love the best. Binabati ko rin po ang ating school head ng Baguio City High na si Ma'am Brenda Carino. Maraming salamat sa inyong pag-entertain.
At syempre nakaka-induct naman ng ating mga bida kids. Kaya minsan nakakamiss na talaga magturo ng mga ganyang sayaw, mga sayaw, hindi ba partner? So sana pagbalik normal na ay makapagturo ulit ako ng mga ganyang klase, mga sayawit, hindi ba? Kaya Ngayon, para bigyan naman tayo ng updates tungkol sa National Educators Academy of the Philippines, tawagin po natin ang ating mahal na Undersecretary at Chief of Staff, Yusek Nepomuceno Malaluan. Morning po, Yusek.
Yes, magandang umaga sa inyong lahat at magandang umaga sa ating DepEd family mula sa CAR na sa pamumuno ni Regional Director Estela Carino. Siyempre magandang umaga sa ating kalihim, Secretary Leonor Magtolis Briones at sa aking kasama natin sa ASEC Malcolm Garma. We are happy to report to everyone that a key program of reforms under the administration of Secretary Briones, the transformation of the National Educators Academy of the Philippines, is currently progressing very well. Ito pong ating National Educators Academy of the Philippines ang siyang unit o opisina sa Department of Education na may mandato at responsibilidad sa in-service professional development of our teachers and school leaders. Ito pong NEAP by historical origin it's a 1985 era organization at ang pinag-umpisahan po nitong NEAP ay dito mismo sa Baguio Teachers Camp. Dito na itayo yung unang National Educators Learning Center, which is now building here in Baguio Teachers Camp. Alam po ninyo, nung unang pumasok si Secretary Briones, ang unang tiningnan, the first, if we recall, in mid-2016, we are in the middle already of the presentation of the budget. And that was the major task of the incoming administration, and there was a review of the budget for defense of the budget in Congress. And among the, in looking at the major programs of the department in relation to the budget, one of the program areas that the Secretary inquired is unit in the Department of Education called the National Educators Academy of the Philippines. To have an academy with an agency like the department is major, and one of the key questions was what are the attributes and features of an academy? Because when you talk about an academy, it evokes certain characterizations of being an academic unit in charge of teaching and learning for teachers and school leaders, and it is also of a quality of professional development that is well respected and recognized by its peers, meaning to say including the academic institutions of higher learning. And it is at that point that we embarked on a study of this NEAP. We started with looking at what this really is, what is its potentials, and what are the areas for improvement. And we partnered with a Philippine Normal University Research Organization, RCTQ, to conduct the study on NEAP. And that is when the NEAP transformation was born. If you recall, Secretary, one of those that conducted the study with us when it was presented to you was then former Undersecretary Mike Luz, during that presentation. And so after that, it was then that the Secretary issued the, based on that study, the directive for the transformation of NEAP, which is currently ongoing. And this transformation of NEAP consists of 3 core areas. The first is the organizational transformation of NEAP. We are upgrading the human resource capability of NEAP, and part of that is streamlining its functional mandates, as well as expanding its human resource. And we have been approved by the DBM for an additional 75 items, 25 of which are in the NEAP Central Office, and the rest are with our regions, providing 3 additional NEAP items for each of the regions. The other component of NEAP transformation is the program transformation, where we are endeavoring to integrate all the professional development programs through a strong quality assurance and recognition. Dati po, professional programs ng Department of Education ay parang pinaghahati-hati sa iba't ibang bureaus and services with their own priorities, but this for a professional development program to be funded by the human resource development funds of the Department of Education being overseen by NEAP, you will have to pass through a recognition system, both as a learning service provider as well as with respect to professional development courses. It also has to be approved and quality assured by NEAP, anchored on the professional standards for teachers. But it is not only the organizational transformation and the program transformation that we are taking, we are also upgrading the training facilities and infrastructure of the NEAP. Nabanggit ko po yung pinakaunang training facility ng NEAP ay naririto mismo sa Teachers Camp. Nung pong nabisita natin yan ay napag-alaman natin na it has become a rental asset of the department through NEAP, and not anymore functioning as a training facility primarily intended for our own DepEd teachers and personnel. And so we are embarking to recover that facility as a modern training facility for NEAP, exclusively for the use of our teachers and school leaders for their professional development. And I was late in this press conference because we had a meeting with the contractor undergoing the rehabilitation and really looking to solve any areas of delay. This is, Secretary, the design perspectives of the NEAP. This is how the perspective of the NEAP building is looking like. It is a, if you can see, there is these louvres that evokes the idea of your traditional Baguio huts and houses as part of traditional houses or huts as part of its design elements. This is going to be a modern, it is being transformed into a modern facility that can provide both a in-person or face-to-face professional development programs, as well as a blended learning delivery. It has a theater secretary that we are reviving. The theater used to be, has become a bodega in the past, but we are reviving that theater. I just don't have how big the seating capacity is. It is a big conference, serve as a venue for both training and big meetings of the Department of Education. It has a number of smaller conference rooms for in-depth meetings. It will house a library, a cafeteria within the premises. It will have a studio for the production of professional development programs for our teachers. And it will be at the heart of the Baguio Teachers Camp to also recover the key original history of the Baguio Teachers Camp as a facility for professional development of our teachers and school leaders. And also yesterday we were in DepEd CAR for the groundbreaking of their extension building, NEAP CAR, and we also signed a cooperation agreement between NEAP Central Office and NEAP Baguio with NEAP CAR, so that we can harness the training facilities of both NEAP CAR and NEAP Baguio for the full servicing of our professional development needs for our teachers. And the funding for that building was facilitated by the Central Office with the help of Congress, and we were able, under the leadership of Secretary Briones and with the help of Undersecretary Sevilla as well, and our office able to secure the funding of 32 million pesos for that new NEAP training facility. And finally, as an update, ito pong pagsasaayos natin ng in-service professional development program ay may kapartner na isa pang major reform, and that is the reform in career progression in the Department of Education. Currently pending before the Office of the Executive Secretary is a proposed executive order expanding the teacher positions from the current teacher 1, 2, and 3. Kung may mga teachers tayo at mga guru dito, pagpasok ninyo ay ang ating entry-level position ay teacher 1 with a salary grade of salary grade 11. The next is teacher 2 with salary grade 12. And the next is teacher 3 with salary grade 13. Pagkatapos nun ay kailangan na ninyong tumalon for promotion to master teacher 1, which is I think salary grade 18. In between are may mga head teacher positions tayo, pero alam natin na very limited ito kasi head teachers or principal positions are just as many as our schools, which is 47,000. So ang items natin for head teachers and principals will be only as many as there are schools. On the other hand, to be a master's teacher ay malaki na yung academic requirements, at pangalawa ay limited din ang items sa Master Teacher 1 because there's a ratio between your other teachers and the Master Teacher 1 in a certain school. So not all schools actually have, as far as I know, RD Estela, have an item for a Master Teacher. And so limited then. And so we have teachers that sometimes retire only teacher 2 and teacher 3 at the most. But now the executive order will add 4 more steps of teacher 4, 5, 6, and 7 with the corresponding higher salary grades of salary grade 14, 15, 16, 17 before going to 1. And so it took, the secretary actually presented that to the cabinet and it was approved by the cabinet, but its implementation required a close coordination with the DBM, the Civil Service Commission, and the PRC until we were able to finalize the proposed executive order, and we are awaiting the approval of this executive order expanding the teacher positions with teacher 4, 5, 6, and 7 and the corresponding higher salary grades. With respect to the institutionalization, Secretary of the NEAP transformation, I recall that one of your comments when the NEAP transformation study was presented was with respect to the institutionalization, and often that might require legislation. In other words, so that the reforms that we have instituted in NEAP will not be just a matter of executive action, but also has the stability of the mandate of law. And we are happy to note that it was included in the TEC reform law. There is a particular section that codifies the reforms that are being done. And if I recall correctly, this is already approved by both houses and passed bicameral conference. And so NEAP will, the NEAP reforms that are being done will be institutionalized even by legislation, and that might be a new law included in the reform of the Teachers Education Council. So those constitutes our updates on the NEAP transformation, and our next major activity will be the inauguration of the rehabilitated, renovated, and modernized NEAP facility in Baguio. And we were hoping to finish it by end of April, but in our discussion with the contractor, he is looking to up to May 15 for the full completion because of course, some delays from various circumstances, but I can see also the progress of such rehabilitation, and we are certain that it is going to be completed by mid-May. So we will have that inauguration at around that time. So yun lang, Secretary, for our update on the NEAP transformation.
Alright, maraming salamat Yusek Malaluan sa effort ng DepEd at ito ngang NEAP transformation ay makakatulong sa aming mga guro at iba pang mga education leaders and learners. At excited na nga po kami dito sa Cordillera sa napipintong pagbukas muli ng NEAP Teachers Camp.
Kami rin po ay nagpapasalamat kay Yusek Wilfredo Cabral at ASEC Malcolm Garma para sa kanilang mga napapanahong report. Bilang hudyat ng pagsisimula ng talakayan sa pagitan ng ating mga kaibigan sa media at ang butihing Secretary Liling kasama ang ating DepEd officials, ating pakinggan ang mensahe ng ating pinakamamahal na kalihim, Secretary Leonor Magtolis Briones. Pero bago yan, panoorin muna natin ito.
Leonor Magtolis Briones, a passionate educator, an adventurous writer, a gender advocate, a faithful servant of God, a trusted public servant, and a loving mother. She had her education at Silliman University in 1958, obtaining a bachelor's degree in business administration, majoring in accounting, and obtained magna cum laude at the early age of 17. She obtained her master's degree in public administration from the University of the Philippines and postgraduate diploma in development administration from Leeds University in England. She was also conferred Doctor of Public Administration honoris causa by the Central Philippine University in 2014. Liling has also been an achiever as she was awarded with distinction from Leeds University, England, and obtained certificates in policy in public enterprise from Harvard Institute for International Development, Harvard University, and innovations in governance from the John F. Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University, Massachusetts. She also accepted the UP presidency nomination in 2010 that was initiated by the National College of Public Administration and Governance students and was supported by more than 1,000 people coming from the faculty and alumni through signature campaigns. Later on, she ventured into public service as secretary to the Commission on Audit and served as the National Treasurer of the Philippines. She also pursued her life's advocacies, including fighting for social justice. As an established leader, she headed the Freedom from Debt Coalition. Briones was also a gender advocate who raised the level of discourse to address the plight of women. As a passionate advocate for social justice, she addressed the United Nations General Assembly in September 2005. In front of an international delegation, she bravely uttered to them, "Fulfill your promises, as the poor cannot wait for too long." She also became a party list nominee to the Congress under the banner of Kaakbay Party in 2012, which advocated for social reforms. She also served as a prominent petitioner of several non-government organizations and individuals which questioned the constitutionality of the disbursement acceleration program of the previous administration. Secretary Liling has spent most of her life as an educator. Whenever or wherever she delivered a public lecture, she taught like a teacher in a classroom. She became a researcher and professor at the University of the Philippines for over 50 years and was later conferred as Professor Emeritus in 2013 for her outstanding achievement inside and outside the university. A natural lover of music, she is also a member of the Manila Concert Choir and is currently serving as its president. With her invaluable success and journey as a leader and educator, she embraced public service and accepted the challenge to become the Secretary of the Department of Education of the Duterte administration. One of her greatest contributions to DepEd is the installation of reforms in the education system, through the launch of Sulong Edukalidad, the rallying call for national effort to innovate Philippine education. Recently, she launched 2 books that depicted her life as an accomplished public servant and author. The first one was her biography, Faith, Duty, and Country, written by her friend and confidant for nearly 55 years, Dr. Proserpina Chit Domingo Tapales, a former dean of NCPAG, on her journey from being a poor girl from the Hulngan, Negros Oriental, up to being a public servant and advocate of education for all. Her second book, Boiled Green Bananas, is a compilation of her columns published in the Business Mirror from 2006 to 2016. To quote her supporters, "There is no shadow of doubt on Briones' probity and integrity." And until today, throughout her 80 years of experience, she shows how a true servant leader should be: ethical, dignified, and responsible.
Magandang sa lahat. I'm very happy to be physically present in Baguio and the Cordillera region, which I often visited before the pandemic. And it's good to be back here and to meet again the members of the DepEd family, as well as the communities who have always been supporting education in our region. I don't need to make another speech. As a teacher, I usually, even at the graduate level, I would make a roll call of my students. Elaine and Yusik Ann, Asik GH, they all know my habit of making a roll call, but now I will not do that because it will just add to the time that is lost to you, members of the press, for asking questions. And since my colleagues and the members of the DepEd family, especially our officials, have already briefed you on just some of the latest developments in the Department of Education, I would like to proceed directly to the question and answer period. And I have Asik Malcolm and Yusek Nepo, as well as Ardistela, and we also have a number of our regional directors who are here for our Management Executive Committee meeting, who can also give and detailed answers to what you raise. I would just like to add an additional bit of information, and I would like to specially ask the media to place emphasis on each time I visit Baguio, each time I visit the Cordilleras, I always say that after all the weeping and the crying and the finger pointing and the blaming on the people, I always mention that there are 20 schools in the Philippines whose scores are equal to or superior to the scores of the OECD countries, meaning the countries in Europe. And one of these schools, 20 schools, is the Baguio National High School, which scored very high in English. I always mention this each time, and I wonder why we always focus on what are perceived as our failures, but never the victories, never the superiorities. I have visited Cordillera and Baguio several times because ang biro ko nga, I want to find out what is in the air of Baguio, Baguio National High School. Why are they getting high scores while everybody is very angry over the so-called low scores and are being at the bottom of the cellar? There are 20 schools in the entire country who can, in our accent, say face to face with the schools in Europe, with the schools in Southeast Asia, and say that their scores are just as good. And I visited several times and talked with the teachers, talked with the students to find out what is their secret formula. Unfortunately, the pandemic set in, because my plan really was to visit these 20 schools so that we will learn from them and their high performance. We weep and blame each other over low performance, but we don't celebrate, we don't praise those who perform very well. And one of them, as I said, is the Baguio National High School. The last time I visited Baguio National High School, kanina you saw them singing in their uniforms. The last time I visited them, they were singing and dancing in their respective costumes. And I thought that it was delightful. You have children who speak English very well and who did very well in the examinations, but they also know how to dance, they know how to sing, and they speak very well. And this is something which I would like to beg media in this region to emphasize, that even as we blame each other for what we consider as failures in international assessments, there are very bright spots of victory, of excellence, and we have to learn from these schools. That's why I came here twice to talk, especially with the teachers. So that's one. Which leads me to the forthcoming second round for the PISA examinations, which USEC NEPO is overseeing. We had a long debate because before I was Secretary of Education, we had 7 Secretaries of Education, because PISA started in 1980 and the Philippines did not participate. I too was of a mind not to participate because I knew that the next year would be election time and it will become a political issue. I also had an idea that we will not score very well, although it was most painful to see us hugging, as they say, at the bottom of the cellar. And so we debated among ourselves, we consulted our friends and supporters, and the advice was that we only had 2 choices. Either we rest from PISA again as my predecessors did, 7 secretaries, or continue learn from the results of the PISA. My only participation was that I decided, with the support of the DepEd family, to join the PISA international assessments at that time, even as I knew that we were not going to score well, but we were going to use that information as a basis for improving education. But I'm very proud of these 20 schools, among which is a public school, and this is the Baguio City National School, and one of our MCs says that she is a graduate. I even talked with the teachers and asked them what is their secret? How do they reach out to the students? And then when I saw the students dancing and singing in their traditional costumes, and all the more I was convinced that we are not only producing students who can pronounce English the way it is expected to be pronounced, and the intonation which is required, but also who know their history, their culture, who honor their way of dressing, who honor their mores, and the way the community makes decisions on very important matters that affect the various communities. So on that score, we are joining PISA again, but this time we are not only looking at the administrative aspects. We'll have a number of schools which are joining PISA, and they are being prepared, and we would like to encourage them. Cordillera, Baguio National High School already has set a record, and so that record has to be maintained. And we believe and we hope, in spite of the pandemic, kasi we wanted to focus on PISA, we are hopeful that the regions who did well will do well as expected. I also visited Pasig. Can you believe it? 3 schools in Pasig having the very high level of scores as well. And this, I hope media, I hope the public will be interested in these 20 schools. How come their scores are comparable to that of Singapore? How come their scores are comparable to that of schools of children of their age in Europe? And again, I would like to emphasize that these children were not necessarily trained or did not necessarily start during this administration, because these are the 15 to 17-year-olds. And so we're doing everything to prepare them under the difficult circumstances of the pandemic, even as we are also looking forward to the what I always joke as the face-to-face progressive expansion of the policy at this time. Also, I was surprised when Undersecretary Willie Cabral reported during our MANCOM meeting that we have had an unprecedented number of third-level positions which were approved, which exceeds that of any other Secretary of Education. And this is because a good number of them are from regional offices, frontline officers. This is because of my training in public administration, which really advocates regionalization. Each region is a mini department of education. And so we are giving them the autonomy and the accountability, of course, as well, and responsibility to help us make decisions on face-to-face, especially at this time. There is a great deal of interest in face-to-face. And at the time, at the height of all the criticisms, why no face-to-face? Dalawang bansa na lang ang hindi face-to-face, nag-lockdown ng schools. The other country is Djibouti, and I'm sure Djibouti is already bored to death with the constant comparison with the Philippines. And sasabihin, dalawa na lang bansa. What we don't realize and we don't recognize is that our schools have been open for 2 years. We never closed schools. It's just that we shifted to a different policy to a mix of methodologies of continuing the learning process of our children. We did not, while we locked down the buildings, we did not lock down the process of learning and of education. And we in the Philippines also believed the story, even as we knew that last October, we opened schools. This September, we opened the academic year again. But still, we believe that our schools have been closed. And we are the only country left in the world not having face-to-face. Also, another information which I would like to share with you, and which I keep on repeating, Lolas keep on repeating and repeating and repeating to their grandchildren and their children, whatever reflections they have. Even as we are excited about face-to-face, the face-to-face that we are implementing is not going to be like the face-to-face that you are used to, where you are with a teacher, where the children move around as they please. Even in the most admired countries who are supposed to be active in face-to-face, they don't have face-to-face every day, every week, 6 hours a week with the teacher. It's always the dominant approach is the blended approach, where you have both online teaching as well as face-to-face. You have face-to-face, like yesterday, we had the opportunity to visit a senior high school where the children were learning how to bake, pastries and cookery, and that cannot be taught online only. So the teacher was there all the time. Yon, laboratory work, kailangan face-to-face. But at the same time, when our children graduate, by the time your children, your grandchildren graduate, the world will be different. Much of how the world operates, including the Philippines, will be online. We'll use very high level of technology. So our children have to be prepared not only by face-to-face or face-to-face, but also they have to be prepared for online, for technology, for advances in science and technology. Our best school teachers who are participating in international contests, for example, the Dubai Teachers Award. By the way, Dubai Teachers Award is $1 million. And the good news is that every year we always have teachers who qualify among the finalists. One of them was even number 3. Yeah, PhD in mathematics. And he devised ways of teaching children mathematics using designs, songs, and music which are traditional to the traditional societies, for example, in the Visayas. Another teaches physics. And then we have the Princess Chakra Award in Thailand. That's $25,000. And most of these finalists, these teachers who qualify, are those who are developing ways of teaching, of moving forward, and so on. Like the way you plan to have your children take up medicine or engineering. Maybe we don't teach, we will not be teaching medicine the way it is taught right now, about laboratories and so on. Because the time will come, and it will be sooner than later, when all you do is to attach a gadget to your wrist or to the body, and you know already everything, blood pressure, body chemistry, etc., and even prescriptions. So what do you teach the doctors? What do you teach the engineers? How do we teach our children to cope with change? The most important thing that we have to teach our learners is accepting change. One time, a group of individuals said that, nag-comment sila, what is this crazy old woman talking about? Because I said, by the time that our learners graduate, everything that we have taught them will have become irrelevant because of the advances in science and technology. So I said, and they said, what is she talking about? The traditional way is that the teacher is the fount of all wisdom, the fountain of all knowledge. Now the teacher leads the learners in looking at the world in a different way, in looking not only at our world, at our country, at our region, but perhaps even of our planetary system and our galaxy. Because we are already searching for galaxies to which we might migrate, because we are destroying not only our planet, but our entire planetary system. And we have to be part of that. Our children have to be part of that effort. So I got carried away, and once I start telling stories, I was telling Stella this morning that, grandparents always like to tell stories and to give lessons. And but as I promised, I will not go into very great detail. I want to proceed to the question and answer portion so that we can interact and you can raise whatever issues you would like to clarify with the Department of Education, with the help of BIOSEC NEPO, ASCOM Malcolm, RD Stella, and if there are regional directors who are around, then they can help out. PISA started in 2000. And between 2000 and 2022, we had 7 secretaries of education. We started in 2000, PISA started, and it was only during this administration that a very painful decision was made to participate, just so we would learn how we stand with the rest of the world. So let us modify our finger pointing. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, mahal naming Secretary Liling, sa inyong mensahe. Talaga pong nawari naming tunay ang dapat nating pagtuunang ipaalam ang latest updates and developments na nagaganap sa DepEd sa tulong ng ating media partners, lalo na po ang mga success stories. At dahil marami pa po tayong pag-uusapan na magagandang balita, dediretso na po tayo sa ating press conference proper. Makakasama po natin si Director Nina Bianca Sanglay at Sir Loy Palaway, PIO ng DepEdCar, na magsisilbing moderators ng ating press conference.
Naimbaga aldaw, Director Nina at Sir Loy.
Magandang umaga sa ating lahat. Thank you so much, Miss Elaine and Mr. Frank. Isang maalab at mapagpalang pagbati mula po sa information officers ng DepEdCar. Magandang umaga po, Direk Nina. I'm so happy that I'm with you today physically. We've been partnering online.
Virtual.
Virtual lang siya. So, yun. Of course, our greetings go out also to our Ma'am Likaina, our adopted daughter of Benguet. Likaina means helpful and trustworthy. And it's a Kankanai term according to our Benguet elders. So, Ma'am Nina?
Ayan, muli magandang tanghali na, Sir Roy. Sir Roy, magandang tanghali na. So, ayan, Thank you very much for having us at saka kahit medyo malamig yung klima sa Baguio, napakamainit ang pagtanggap sa amin mula sa Central Office. Gaya nga ng nasabi kanina, makakasama natin si Secretary Leonor Magtolis Briones at syempre nakaantabay din, makakasama natin, tutulong, sasagot sa mga katanungan ng ating media friends, sina Undersecretary Nepomuceno Malaluan, Assistant Secretary Malcolm Garma, at syempre si RD Estela Carino, and virtually joining us, andyan po sina Undersecretary Annalyn Sevilla, Undersecretary Willie Cabral, and Director Mark Bragado. Ayan, paalala lamang po sa ating mga kaibigan mula sa press at media, maximum of 2 questions lamang po ang maaaring itanong upang mabigyan ng pagkakataon lahat mag-ask ng kanilang question. Yan, Sir Loy, pwede na tayong magsimula.
Yes, thank you, Direct Nina. At ngayon, meron tayong question mula sa Radyo Pilipinas, Tabuk City. It was sent via my messenger, si Ma'am Stella Loki yata to, ng Radyo Pilipinas, Tabuk City. The first question, will vaccine cards be an expected requirement for DepEd learners if and when COVID-19 vaccines become sufficient? So, can we throw it to either our dear Secretary or ASEC Garma? Yun daw, required na din ba ang vaccine cards?
Pwedeng mag-volunteer.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, ma'am.
We have stated several times that we don't require vaccination for the children. What we require is the consent of the parents. What we require and what we prefer, of course, is for our teachers to be fully vaccinated. And this is on the recommendation of 5 groups of pediatric organizations, experts on children, mga doctors, scientists, researchers, who have advised us that children have very high resistance to COVID. And so it's not necessary, and we don't want to deprive the children of this opportunity. Pero the teachers, since we already have nationally about more than 90% compliance with the vaccination activity, we prefer, of course, the teachers to be fully vaccinated. Or if they visit the school facilities and premises, they have they are not vaccinated, they have to undergo the usual tests to make sure that our children will not be exposed. So, ayan, no requirement for children. What we require is the written consent of the parents and the agreement of the local government to host a face-to-face class, as well as we also expect that we will be holding face-to-face classes in DepEd facilities which are adequate and which are responsive. Kasi kailangan may tubig, kailangan may supply ng whatever medicines, the usual medicines there are, kailangan may isolation room, in terms of DepEd responsibility. So it's really Department of Health. Pag sabi ni Department of Health na level 1 na or level 2 na ang isang payag na kami as far as the health aspect is concerned. Pero since we are going to hold our classes in the neighborhood, in the houses, in the properties of local governments, doon kami sa bahay nila magkaklase, siyempre, mangangatok kami at kailangan ang kanilang permission. And generally, local governments have been very cooperative with very, very, very few and rare exceptions. And thirdly, of course, we are requiring the parental consent, written parental consent, because these are children, yun, tapos aming facilities, etc. Pero una talaga, yung risk assessment ng Department of Health is the starting point. Oo. Baka si Asik Malcolm gusto magdagdag niyan. We repeat that all the time because somehow, pang ilan na namin yung sinasabi, somehow the impression is children have to be vaccinated. So we are campaigning, of course, for children to be vaccinated, but we are not insisting on it.
Yes, ma'am. Again, as I have mentioned earlier during my presentation, that this question is becoming a prevalent and perennial question. No? So just want to reiterate what the Secretary has already stated, that we don't require vaccination among the learners who would like to participate in our limited face-to-face. But we prefer that they are vaccinated for their own safety also. And that will also give some level of confidence among the parents in allowing their children to participate, no, in the limited face-to-face classes. We have to balance, as much as we would like to give opportunity to as many children as possible to experience again the going back to the school, no, physically. We also have to balance that with the Department of Health program on pediatric vaccination. Kasi ang talagang isa sa malaking problema ngayon, yung supply natin ng vaccine for pediatric vaccination. So we don't want to be, beholden with the supply of the pediatric vaccine and compromise the opportunity that we would like to provide our children to again experience the physical environment of our schools. But again, we would like again to reiterate that malaking bahagi ng ating ginagawang pag-iingat ay yung pag-maintain pa din ng physical distancing in our classrooms and also the provision of proper ventilation and yung masking. Hindi pa rin talaga natin pwedeng i-forgo yung wearing of masks, especially among the learners. And this is to provide the basic and additional safety, no, for our learners insofar as the COVID-19 virus is concerned. Thank you, Director Nina and Lloyd. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ma'am Secretary, and of course, Asik Malcolm for reiterating that. And of course, speaking of learners who are joining us face-to-face, we have campus journalists, Ma'am Secretary, coming from Baguio City National High School. And we have a question from them. Unahin muna natin si Zyril Perez. Go ahead, Zyril.
Good day po. I am Zyril Perez from Baguio City National High School. And my question po is, how are we preparing for the PISA? What are some of the initiatives of DepEd in preparing for this? And did the pandemic gravely affect the preparations for PISA?
I think, I believe that NEPO, Yusek Nepo can answer your questions, no? We are making the appropriate preparations. Enhanced lang, hindi lang yung administrative aspect, the selection of the samples, etc., but also preparing the students and making them aware that they're participating in this exam and so on and so forth. But again, congratulations to Baguio City National High School. I don't know if you were here when I visited your school twice to really consult the teachers and the learners as well as the community as to your secret formulas. Okay, Nepo.
Thank you. I'm happy to respond to a campus journalist from our own DepEd family. What, if I may ask, what year are you in already?
Grade 10 po.
Grade 10. And so you'll be going to senior high school next year, no?
Yes po.
And so you've experienced the last two school years under our distance learning modality, correct?
Yes, sir. Correct.
So, if you may share some feedback on how did you find this new mode of learning? Were you able to continue your studies for the subjects during that time?
Yes, sir. It definitely was a little hard to adjust to it since it wasn't something I was used to, but it was manageable as time passed. It became more manageable for me to cope up with learning in that setup.
And what modality was done in your school?
Sir, in City High, we have modular learning and we have blended learning where we have online classes and we have modules at the same time.
If you were to compare I think you mentioned that you had to have some period to adjust to the way learning happens. Ano yung what are the distinct features of learning through blended learning? What is, if you were to note some of, you might say, good things or more challenging things, or pros and cons, what would you say might be those based on your experience?
Creating a new schedule for myself, since when it's distance learning, I have to manage my own time more efficiently, and that I sort of have to create an own schedule for myself so that I can fit in the online synchronous classes and answering asynchronous activities on my own. So in school, in pre-pandemic school, face-to-face, we kind of have that schedule already set out for us with our class schedules, and just making a new schedule for myself posed as a challenge for a while.
Would you say that learning still happens in distance learning?
It certainly still does happen even when you're alone. It's just more on how you'll do that learning by yourself that also poses as a problem.
Thank you. Thank you for the interview. What's your name?
Zyril Perez po.
You proved my point.
Yes.
You proved the point that learning has not stopped at all. It's just that we had to devise other approaches, like dependence on the teacher, like teaching independence, like encouraging the parents to study along with their children if they make themselves available. There are even other schools, not necessarily in Baguio, where they have training for the yayas, because of course there are families where the yayas are the ones educating the children. So a lot of creative methodologies have emerged, and it's only now that we made the decision that those who have already adjusted, like you have adjusted to distance learning, are now saying that they have managed and they have made a lot of savings sa pamasahe, sa baon, sa uniform, because the children learn at home. I like to give this example of a journalist, and I will not mention her. She lives in Caloocan, and her child goes to this very exclusive school in Makati. And she's already very worried and burdened about, making all the arrangement for the hatid, for the sundo, for the baon, and the uniform, and the shoes, and so on and so forth. And so there are pluses. By the way, it will be interesting to the media that immediately after the pilot study, we conducted a survey, and the learners were also interviewed. The learners, the parents, the teachers, and those who participated in the pilot. And this is why we have great confidence in applying a modified version of blended learning. We are not letting go of online, because when you have your career, you will do a lot of online things as well, in addition to the face-to-face things that we all look forward to.
Yes.
Thank you, Nepo, for turning the tables.
No, it was not. I think it was a very good opportunity to have a conversation with one of our learners. So thank you for graciously responding to my query to your questions. But that's part of journalism. Sometimes you also answer the questions, not just ask them. But just to note on your point on that learning happens, one of in the points that you made is being able to learn on your own. That is really a skill that even before the pandemic is already apparent that we should develop among our learners, because as you know now, most of the, unlike before, probably in the time of Secretary Briones, myself, and ASEC Malcolm, for us to find sources of knowledge and information, you really need to meet your teachers, you need to go to the library. But you know that everything is now, information and knowledge is at your fingertips with the intervention of technology. And what is important is to be able to know where to find them, be able to distinguish which are good, truthful, reliable information versus all the fake news. And so these are important skills in the present world. Secretary, I have I call her a niece, but she's actually my apo already, because she's the daughter of my niece, who is in grade 1. And so she has not had the opportunity for face-to-face classes. And she was at home, and we were playing some music with Spotify, and she played a tune from, I forgot the title. I think it's Encanto.
You really are a lolo. You already forget.
It's Encanto, which is a new, I think it's a new Disney movie, if I'm not mistaken. And so I asked her, what is it all about? Who is the character? So initially she was answering, but I think she was growing tired of my question, and she told me, you ask Google. She told me. And then she also asked me, you ask the director. But kids now, in other words, there's a new context for learning. And the notion that learning stops, or that it is necessarily inferior to face-to-face classes, does not appreciate the dynamic nature of learning. Learning in the time of the war secretary is still learning in a different context, and you imbibe different ways of looking at the world, which is part of learning. Yes. In fact, I am amazed at how institutions who would put a a like a rule of thumb about learning in blended or distance learning being inferior by so and so percentage from face-to-face learning, and then calculating it over the years as meaning a loss to the economy by this much over a certain period, I think also misses these institutions also miss their own advocacy for lifelong learning, which they say happens in whatever formal, informal, non-formal context. So you can see the dissonance of their analysis, just to situate it within the perspective that they want for a particular context. And I think, well, thank you for noting that, you know, learning is a dynamic process, and that does not say that there are those who will be that there will not be those who will find it difficult to cope, and we recognize that. And I think the Department of Education and the parents and the community should really try to recover from any learning loss that happened. But to say that it is learning loss all around really misses the dynamic nature of learning as you have yourself articulated based on your experience in the past 2 years. But of course, I'm sure that, have you started your face-to-face classes already?
We have not started po.
Is there a plan that you know for Baguio?
There is a plan that I know of po.
I hope you can start, because I think that certainly in-person interaction is still very necessary in the education process. But anyway, going back to your question.
She asked a question.
Yes.
How are we preparing for PISA?
PISA.
Otherwise, mapipisa tayo naman uli.
So, there are 3 levels of preparation that the department is doing for PISA. The first is our strategic intervention, which we are doing through a professional development program on assessment and emerging literacies with focus on PISA. And this was developed by a consortium of partners, both internal and external to DepEd. That includes the Office of the Secretary, the Bureau of Education Assessment, or BEA, the Bureau of Learning Development, or BLD, for the internal units. And for our external partners, we are cooperating with ACT-RC, which is a research institute partnership between the University of the Philippines and the University of Melbourne. We have also there the Front Learners, which is an external partner. We also have the Center for Education Measurement and a number of academics from PNU and De La Salle University. And this professional development program is comprehensive in scope. It discusses the enhancement of teachers' assessment competencies, assessment of learning in DepEd, the policies on assessment. It maps the comparison between the Philippine K-12 curriculum and the international large-scale assessments, how they compare, and then it provides for principles and practices to adapt the classroom-based assessment to the emerging literacies by this international large-scale assessment. So that is the strategic intervention, which obviously will not have an overnight result, but it will have to be sustained over time. The second is a test administration preparation that is being undertaken by the Bureau of Education Assessment. an international assessment like PISA has a lot of integrity standards that we have to follow, including the protocols for the security of the questions, the training of the proctors, how these are reported, the computers that are being done. So that is being taken care of and supervised by our BEA. And the third is we are also providing some computer-based assessment familiarization to our learners, because the way you take the exam in school, in class, traditionally, could or is likely different from how the PISA exam is being undertaken. So the OECD PISA itself has released a CBA familiarization guide intended for learners, or so we have made it available to the schools and the learners, and we are also supplementing that with similar materials. But ultimately, we have to always have a good perspective on why we are taking this. This is not a race to the top, but this is about getting feedback from assessment and to see how we are faring. So, those are how we are preparing for PISA. And again, I thank you for your responses also to our questions. Maraming salamat.
I should have shared with you that Yusek Nepo is a lawyer, and he's also a data analytic expert, and he's an economist. Kaya ganun ang questioning niya, and so he's learning from you as well as answering your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you din po.
Mabuti, nagtanong ka. Because you prove exactly my point. Kami Bisaya, you prove my point. that you still learn, you're still learning. And sabihin mo that we are at the bottom of the barrel. But why do we have these 20 schools which have very respectable scores? Na pwede mong ma-eyeball to eyeball si Singapore, ma-eyeball to eyeball mo si Vienna o si Spain o si England o si UK. Itong mga 20 schools na ito with their very good showing, and I'm glad to share this with media, because each time I come here I always announce it, and I visit your schools and talk with your teachers as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you din po.
Thank you for participating.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Secretary, and of course, Yusek Nepo. And of course, palakpakan natin si Miss Zyril Perez of Baguio City National High School. Ninenergos tuloy ang susunod na magtatanong kasi isang campus journalist ulit.
Baka matanong din si
Kaya
Loy.
matanong din. Kaya iba to na lang yung tanong natin kay Sir Malcolm. Sir Malcolm. So we have another campus journalist from Baguio City National High School, Eliza Corpus. Go ahead, Eliza.
Good day po. I am Eliza Corpus, also from Baguio City National High School, and my question is, with some schools already conducting face-to-face classes, what do you think is the biggest challenge in the current setup?
With the permission of the Secretary and Yusek Nepo, just to answer that very difficult question. No? So, of course, number one is that we term our face-to-face classes limited. So the biggest challenge really is on that kind of limitation. For one, we only accommodate 12 to 15 students per class. So that means for us to be able to accommodate as many learners as possible, kailangan natin ng maraming classrooms na gagamitin. So kung ang eskwelahan ay kakaunti lamang ang kanilang classroom, they have now to extend the number of classes that they can program or schedule in their school. So ito yung problema natin, that to be able to accommodate more schedules, more class programs, ay yung ibang eskwelahan nagdadagdag ng oras, no? Kaya iba dyan, naaabot ng 2 shifts, 3 shifts, so as to accommodate as many learners as possible who would like to participate in our limited face-to-face. The second challenge really is on the compliance, no, of with the requirements that were set by our colleagues from the Department of Health, no. So unlike before, yung ating mga classrooms ay kung ano yung meron tayong silya, meron tayong blackboard, meron tayong tape, lamesa. But now, we have to design or set up our classroom in such a way that this will be compliant with what is being set in the health protocols. Now, we have to provide proper ventilation. So, this is probably an opportunity in a sense, no, not a challenge, but really an opportunity for us to discover ano ba talaga yung dapat na learning environment ng ating mga mag-aaral while they're in the classroom. For example, ventilation. Probably before the COVID, we have neglected already that aspect, no, yung ventilation. That's why many schools have resorted to the use of air-conditioned units. Well, of course, in Baguio, you don't have to do that, no? Natural air conditioning ang inyong mga classrooms, but some schools have resorted to investing on air conditioning units so as to provide what we perceive as good ventilation. Pero nakita natin, because of the pandemic, ang proper ventilation pala talaga is really the free flow of air, and that would lessen the adverse effect of virus, not only COVID but also of the other virus, no, or other viruses. So the next challenge that we see is really how to connect yung in-school natin with that of the ongoing home-based learning. So hindi kasi pwedeng independent yung ginagawa natin doon sa in-school or yung face-to-face, and this will be independent from what we are already doing in the home-based learning. Remember what the Secretary has mentioned kanina, that we are not letting go of our distance learning, and this is what we already call the hybrid. But I guess the biggest challenge really is how to connect the two modalities so that yung learning is really of something that is continuous. Walang dichotomy. It's not a dichotomy that home-based learning versus in-school learning. But these two modalities should complement each other. And I think that is one of the bigger challenges na kailangan nating i-address, of which some of the areas that we really have to look into. One is the delivery of the instruction. What kind of resources that we are going to use pagka home-based yung learning at kung school-based. Second is the assessment. What kind of assessment do we use when we use the modality using the platform of TV, radio, and the module, and that of what is being used in the classroom. So all of these are challenges that we see, but the reason why we devolve the authority and the decision-making to the regions, down to the divisions, down to the school level, so that the decision-making to address these challenges can be more expeditious. Mas madali. You don't have to tell the central office, this is our problem and this is what we're going to do. Probably the last challenge really is on resources. We recognize the fact that to be able to comply with the requirements set, no, in our protocols, we need to invest, we need to redesign, we need to reconstruct, renovate, no, some of the existing structures in our classrooms and in the school itself. So this is why we provided some augmentation really to help our schools comply with these requirements. So these are the challenges that we see as of now. Thank you for your question.
Thank you po.
Thank you, Asik Garma, and of course, thank you to Miss Eliza Corpus. So, Ma'am Nina, sino pang susunod na ating
Yes, other
tatawagin?
than our learners that are present here today, maganda yung interaction, Sir Loy, ano? Ngayon naman, makakasama din natin ang isa sa ating mga kaibigan from the media. Andito po si Sir Vince Cabreza ng Philippine Daily Inquirer.
Good afternoon po. I'd like to follow up kung pwede dun sa PISA. Just some details. When is it happening? Have you selected the students? And have you checked, may lumalabas po ba na binago rin ng PISA yung kanilang exam? Because the whole world is in a pandemic. Baka kako nag-adjust din yung exam na ibibigay. Have you been given any hints na baka bago rin yung exam na for whenever? Is that going to be December?
Just a few more information on the PISA. The PISA tests our 15-year-old learners, but it is only a statistically representative sample. And so, therefore, there is a sampling methodology. It's a two-stage sampling. First, they get a representative number of schools, randomly selected ito. The Department of Education has no hand in the selection of these schools. And then from within those schools, there is a second stage random sampling of only 42 learners from their student population in the school that are 15 years old. That is also based on their selection, statistically random selection. Now, there is a period, I think as of this time, I'm not sure if already for all schools or for a certain number of schools, the sample students have already been identified, but they need to be identified because they need to get to comply with the protocols also, that there's a parent's permit, there's an orientation in how the test will be conducted, but they will have no access to the test questions. The test questions, there is a technical team that is supervised by PISA that provides for the security codes for the exam. The exam are computer-based. It is not similar to the tests that we know before when we were students, that parang single questions, either open-ended or multiple choice, or types of question. These questions have a lot of computer-based interactiveness already. Sometimes it covers multiple sources, similar to the environment that we see ourselves now, that we have to deal with multiple sources of information. And these are also what is called yung continuous format. In other words, questions are related to the first and then the second and so on. So talagang very demanding na skills ang kailangan dito. And it will require you to integrate your foundational knowledge with what they call contextualized questions from real world issues and problems. Now, every round of PISA, there is a focal domain or subject, as they call it. There are 3 subjects, reading, math, and science. And every round, there's a focal subject or domain. In the last 2018, it was reading. Now it will be mathematics. So there are 188 participating schools with the 42 learners, and it is not taken on a single day for all the schools. They are scheduled in batches. So it will cover from end March to April of 2022.
This month na.
Yes, and our request is for us, a request to our media friends is to give our schools and learners the space and time not to be disturbed directly, and our commitment is after the exam, we will have a more comprehensive press conference to detail the test. But I think, as mentioned by the Secretary, there also needs to be an emotional preparation
Yes,
for tests. So as much as possible, let's not try to find out what school and try to interview the school and the learners at
I
this
think
time.
we can do that anyway.
Yes, yes.
But yung meron bang indication at this point if these are going to be pandemic oriented tests?
No. I think it will be too late for them to do. In fact, it should have been conducted. This is every 3 years. So 2018, 2019, 2020 to 2021. But because of the pandemic, it was adjusted to 2022. However, there are survey questions that they also make. In other words, not test questions. So they also answer survey, and yun ang there might be questions there that might be related to coping with the pandemic and things like that. But I'm not certain.
Oh, I don't mean the questions they will ask the kids. I meant.
What's that?
I didn't mean questions they will ask the kids. I meant are the set of questions that they will give naka-anchor po kaya yan dun sa fact that the pandemic affected all educational systems in the country, in the world, I meant. So baka kako they adjusted for the pandemic?
I am not. I think I'm sorry. It's a very specific question that I have no
that's okay.
direct.
I was just wondering.
Kung ano.
When is the first test?
It was in 2000.
No, I meant itong test na mangyayari sa March. When exactly?
In end March.
Oh.
No, I think 29.
29
or so. Yeah.
Okay.
But just to note that, as I mentioned, there's a unit in DepEd that is taking care of the administrative preparation. And we are providing some supplemental preparations, but we're keeping what we call an arm's length relationship with the one in charge of the administration to ensure the integrity of the exam.
I understand po.
Yeah.
Can I go to a second question, if you don't mind? This with regards to the Secretary's point na we need to start projecting. Yung not giving up online learning means there will be certain adjustments, resources you pointed out. Does that include, or will it relax the pressure on DepEd to build more schools, for example? You probably won't need too many schools anymore. In a future where online learning is part of the educational system, has that been part of the projection? Meron na po kayong parang 5-year program for post-pandemic education?
Yeah. We are trying to avoid yung sinasabi ni Malcolm kanina, this dichotomy between online and other modalities, that one approach is better than the other kasi biniblend natin depende sa needs ng school at saka needs ng ating learners when they go out. So we don't we strongly object, for example, to the idea that learning was lost during the because there are those who say that mayroong lost learning. So that's one. At saka sabi mo yung hindi ko masyadong nag-gets yung question mo. Yung sinabi mo na kung magkaroon ng you'll have equity problems.
Hindi po. Right now, for the last decade or so, some of the biggest pressures on DepEd is building more schools. But that may not be the case anymore kasi you're combining two online and classroom lessons. The possibility of na hindi na kailanganin ang schools, is that something that you're already projecting within the 10 years after the pandemic?
Again, I should mention another development which you might be interested in,
Yes,
which
ma'am.
is what we call future studies. What is the future of education? What is the future of society? And what is the future, for example, of physical requirements for learning? Where does learning take place? When does learning take place? So that would mean really rethinking our notion of space. And of course, this is a subject not only of interest to the DepEd, but also of our the other branches of government, which are very concerned about the need for more school buildings, the need for more space, and we are rethinking that notion. Kaya in other countries, learning takes place in many other environments just as effectively. So, rethink natin yan kasi yung mga requirements halimbawa, especially for the younger children, yung distancing and all that. And plus, sa urban centers, I don't know about Baguio or about, to a certain extent, Region 1 or Cordillera, may mga places na wala na talaga silang lupa. O yung mga lupa where the schools are located or built are already flooded, are already eroded, and itong that you have to have a building which stands on a physical space. And this is something that has to be discussed as national policy because the other branch of government is debating this issue among themselves, no? Like some members of the legislature think that instead of spending money for school buildings, we spend money for other approaches to learning. Well, others naman in the legislature, for example, believe that you need a school building, you need a roof over your head for the children. So, isa yan sa mga issues which have to be resolved not only by the Department of Education but as part of national policy. Kaya importante yung futures thinking. What's the future of going to be beyond the usual 3-year thinking or 6-year thinking. And then I thought your question have implications also on equity kasi yung requirement for skills in technology, you need digital toys, you need digital equipment, and everybody is helping out. Pero yung connectivity naman ang issue.
Yun din tatanong ko actually. You've already started investing in the internet, pero at the moment, yung mismong infrastructure ang problema.
It's not, of course, much attention is being focused on DepEd, but connectivity, of course, is related to what other agencies are also doing. You might get thousands of donations of computers and laptops, cell phones, especially from bilateral partners, or the Department of Finance is very very efficient in apprehending smugglers and so on. Kung anong mahuli nila, ma-confiscate nila, binibigay sa atin. But again, then you have the related problem of connectivity. So kasi priority natin yung the so-called last mile schools, no. So these are issues which can be resolved not just by the DepEd, this present DepEd, but also national policy, because education is really interlinked to the economy, to society, to politics. And kailangan talaga ang broader view nito. This is why we are starting already what we describe as a futures study group, which is organized by Yosek Nepo and
That's
supported.
internal po sa DepEd.
Yes, yes. Because as I said, and I said this twice yesterday, na we are already thinking, there are those already thinking of where we should migrate, not to another planet as in Superman and Krypton, but to another galaxy, because we are destroying not only our planet but also our galaxy. So thinking very far ahead and preparing our learners for the possibility of very fast changes. Kaya nga yesterday, what I said was resonated with many of our teachers and our learners, that sometimes you are late, and we always say we got that from our foreign conqueror, itong pagka-tarde, pagka-lazy. But we should never be late for the future, because the future is here and now. So that is another aspect of education that we are looking at. This is why we are not giving up on the on hybrid learning, on the mixture, on the combination of technology as well as what we describe as face-to-face. Because even the countries which we admire and which we adore and which we worship, because they are already into face-to-face, don't really have complete face-to-face. Because they have to catch up with technology, and they're very advanced. Nagugulat ako, junior high pa lang, alam mo, that girl I always interview, they're already into AutoCAD for design. And that's what the engineering students here are doing. And this is just a junior high school kid in another country. Kaya habulan talaga ito. But at the same time, let us not forget that we are a people, we have history, we have tradition, we have decision-making cultures. We don't decide the way perhaps other countries decide, because we consult a lot. And this is a traditional approach to decision-making that we get from the traditional societies, not only in the Cordillera but in other parts of the country. So maraming challenges, and we don't claim sole ownership of education. At the same time that we don't accept sole blame for what is now described as a crisis in education. After all, I had 47 predecessors. And for EDSA, I had 7 predecessors. Thank you.
Thank you po.
Yes, maraming salamat, Sir Vince. And just to add, dahil napakaganda ng mga tanong, Sir Loy, just to add, magkakaroon po tayo ng additional response from our USEC Annalyn Sevilla, who is joining us virtually. USEC Ann?
Magandang hapon, good morning, Cordillera, Bonus Region. Madam Vince, napakaganda po ng tanong niyo, sa finance po ako, and I would like to take that opportunity, Secretary Kalihim, to have that question about, do we still need school buildings
Good.
because there is now blended learning and we are blending face-to-face and online learning. So the question is, do we need the school building program? The answer po is yes, we still need, because there's still inequality in the provision of our school building. Probably po there are regions and specific cities na talaga pong fully developed, na talaga may mga classrooms na po sila, may mga buildings na, pero marami pa po sa inventory natin talaga ang nangangailangan ng school building. Lalo na po yung mga nasa last mile school na binention ni Secretary Lee kanina. So that's for the new or the establishment of new school building. The other component of the school building program is the repair and rehabilitation or renovation of school building, and that is where we need the support of course, the executive, the legislative, sila rin po yung magpapasa ng budget natin. But I really hope na mabigyan po ng pansin at ng suporta yung repair natin sa school building. Kasi nga po, marami nang kailangan baguhin mismo, physically, sa facilities natin to support this blended learning approach. Kagaya nga po nung kanina, ang ganda-ganda ng pinag-uusapan, may mga technology na ating po dapat na binibigay para sa mga guro, para sa mga bata. At yung ating pong current setup of the classroom is still really designed for the face-to-face approach only. So we need to calibrate, we need to change the setup of the classroom. Hindi lang po
Magiging
yung
malaking debate
outside
ito
or
because
structure, but
the
also
congressman
inside
do
the
not like to
classroom.
do away
And there are a
with
lot of repair works that we have to work on. So, paano things, kailangan pa rin po, may mga eskwelahan na hanggang ngayon nakapila pa, ibig sabihin backlog ng mga school building program, na talaga naghihintay po ng kanilang sarili mga school building or classrooms. That's number one. And second, yung pong pag-repair, pag-renovate, at pag-rehabilitate ng ating mga classrooms ngayon so that it is responsive to the really the actual learning approach that we're doing. Hindi nga po, ang ganda rin ng sagot ni Asik Marcon kanina, there's no dichotomy, hindi po natin po pwedeng iwalay or pipili na ng isa, face-to-face or online. It should be now blended. And that requires a lot of resources, which is also an answer to the question,
kailangan ng education
challenge natin is
should
really
not
the
be
resources.
tripocalized.
Resources on education funding para sa mga facilities, sa training ng ating mga teacher, because we are now doing this in a different approach. And also, I think isa po sa challenge na gusto ko idagdag is yung dalawa pala na challenges na idadagdag ko sa dami ng mga pinamanage natin ngayon in the Department of Education as enumerated by Asset Marco is yung pong shared responsibility. Now, I think it's during this COVID time, yung po yung silver lining na highlight natin na ang edukasyon ay hindi lamang po nakasalalay sa Department of Education. And we need all of you in the local government unit, the parents, the community, para po matawid natin, itulay natin itong transition na ito na ating ginagawa. And that was really pushed by the pandemic. Hindi po siguro hindi natin ang opportunity being brought to us. The second one is the uncertainty of the health condition. Hindi po kasi namin yun makokontrol. At yun ay something na talaga, kumbaga sa variables, there's fixed variable, and yung isa ay talagang sa dasal po natin dinadaan, na wala na pong variant or wala na pong ibang virus na magde-develop wherein kung saan marami nang sumasama sa progressive expansion ng face-to-face or eventually in the next school year probably ay talagang part na yung limited face-to-face ng ating learning. Ay yun ay hindi ko namin kayang tayaan dahil that is something na nakasalalay na po sa ating mga health experts at mahirap din po sa amin, sa parte namin dahil even though we are preparing for contingencies, uncertainties, and we provide some fund for that, ang hirap is paano kung kulang din, pati yung pag-standby natin o yung pag-prepare natin sa mga contingencies. So, yun po, dito guys, coming from Manila, mga answers ko po ay congratulations sa ganda ng mga tanong na aking po napapakinggan at pati po yung discussion from the Secretary and the EXCO members that we have here. Thank you, Director Nina.
Thank you very much. That's Yusek Annalyn Sevilla. Marami pong salamat at naitahi-tahi ni Yusek Ann yung mga responses sa ating mga questions. And muli, maraming salamat, Sir Vince Cabresa. Yan, for the next question, Sir Loy.
Yes, Direk Nina, pag DepEd talaga, ang daming pwedeng pag-usapan. But in the interest of time, our last two media friends who are here with us physically, take isang question, the rest will be answering through Viber or through our messenger group. So may we have Sir Jong Munar of Radyo Pilipinas. Sir Jong?
Magandang hapon po, Secretary. It's nice to see you again. Tagal-tagal na pong panahon. Proud parent of Baguio City National High School din po ako. Ito lang po, magsisegue lang po ako, Secretary. Kabilang rin ho ba dun sa mga reforma under Department of Education to take in consideration yung plight po ng ating mga private school teachers? Since every year, 100 of thousands graduates ng teacher education, marami pong pumapasa sa LET. They would want to enter DepEd pero pahirapan po dahil nga po sa ranking system, sa dami po nila. And they chose to enter, of course, sa private schools. Although sa salary-wise, hindi po kabilang doon sa salary standardization law. How do we address that problem? At least to minimize, of course, yung problema po sa contractualization within private schools, Secretary. Thank you.
Nung panahon namin, ang hirap maglola palagi. Sa aming panahon, ganito kami, bakit kayo ngayon, ganyan kayo. There was a time when the general perception was that if you are in the private school, you earn so much higher than those in the public school. And that is true in exceptional cases of the very top private schools. But now the situation has been reversing. Bago lang akong dating, napansin ko na bumibilis yung migration ng mga teacher ng private schools to the public schools. Pangalawa, pagdating ni pandemic, ang mga estudyante mismo sa private schools nag-migrate sa public schools. Kasi nga, may mga private schools na nagsasara. At the height of the pandemic, more than 800 schools nagsara. Itong mga maliliit na mga private schools na nahirapang mag-survive. So, yun ang isa sa challenge. I've always believed na kailangan complementary ang public schools at saka private schools. And I'm very glad that there are now hopefully increasing number of private schools which are already opening and starting classes. Pero yung iba, hindi pa feeling nila hindi pa rin sila ready, no? So malaking debate yan, malaking issue kung paano ito matutulungan itong private schools. And also, dati kasi, again, sa panahon ko, nung ako pa ay nasa elementary, and that was how many decades ago, mayroon tayong Bureau of Private Education. May bureau tayo sa DepEd na talagang nag-aasikaso sa mga private schools. Ngayon, rini-revive namin yan. Kasi sabi nga ng iba, ayan kasi may-ari yan ng Silliman University, kaya mahal niya, loves niya yung private schools. It's not that. The Constitution specifically provides that there has to be complementarity between public and private education. And may contribution ang private education, may contribution ang public schools. So we are reviving the office to look into the very special concerns of private schools at this time. The big private schools do not need our attention as much as the schools that are named after saints or after books in the Bible or are located beside the churches. Kung minsan, I have been to places na magkatabi yung isang public school at saka yung private school. At makita mo, walang laman yung private school. nagsisiksika naman doon sa public school because of the impact on the economy. So itong lahat, tinitingnan natin. And thank you for recognizing that there is this challenge because the times have changed na kami noon sa UP until now, what sustains us is our pride and occasionally extreme cases of intellectual arrogance na maski mababa ang sweldo, UP naman tayo. But of course, that is not realistic because there are families to feed, children to put to school, and so on. And kung if you private schools lang ang maka-sustain ito, paano na yung private school system, which we also want to support. And also the superstition, I call it a superstition, Nepo, that kung galing ka sa private school, therefore mas magaling yung English mo, mahusay kang mag-pronounce, magaling yung grammar mo, at saka may accent ka. Oo. Like me, I come from Silliman University, sa college ko, so we have what we call as the Silliman English, na we speak in a particular way. Itong mga public school naman ay mga PROMD, mga poor. That is not true anymore. Kasi itong mga schools natin, yung 20 schools, is a mix of public and private schools. Ito dito, Baguio is obviously public. And then in Pasig, you have private school and public school. And then in Bicol, you have Partido University, who scored very, very well. It's a public institution. Wala na yung distinction, private ka, therefore siga-siga ka, or taga-UP ka, therefore siga-siga ka. That does not hold true anymore. And these are perceptions and biases which we try to correct. Special. Saka yung employment process, yung question mo finally, yung question na those who want to move on to the public sector, we have a new chair of the Civil Service Commission. For several years, we have been saying na may pandemic, nagbago na ang panahon, pero yung appointment process, ganon pa rin. Same pa rin. Forever and ever pa rin, isang taon bago ka ma-employ. At saka marami ka ng utang bago you get hold of your employment paper. And I'm really going to push through our proposals to in a sense, make the appointment process to the public sector, that is a choice that people make, much more, to make it faster. Kasi the need is urgency, is urgent. It's not as if bukas na lang, mañana. We were taught as college student about the mañana habit which you got from our conqueror and the pagka-tardiness and all that. And then, pero kailangan na ngayon na the employment process has to be accelerated. Kasi kinakagalitan kami ng Senate palagi. You were given how many thousand items? Bakit hindi nyo yan na-fill up? This is because of the requirements, which can be unreasonable at this time. Kasi nag-change na ang requirements for particular positions. And I hope that the new chair of the Civil Service Commission will take the time to examine this very lengthy process. Because the more delay there is, and you know that, the people here have master's degree, doctoral degree, and one of the main in governance issues in governance, the more delay there is, the more inefficiency there is, the greater the opportunity for negotiation, for bargaining, and for all sorts of monkey business. Kaya we hope that the next administration will look into this and continue. We started the push to civil service. Kailangan magdagdag ng positions for those in the public sector. Kailangan bilisin yung employment process. Hindi yung 1 taon maghihintay, 6 na taon. In the meantime, baon na sa utang yung applicant. And we have to incentivize the private sector in a way that the balance between the unique contributions of private schools and the unique contributions of public schools will be harmonized. Of course, the combination is to be able to go to both. And there are many who do that. Elementary sila, high school, doon sa private, and then pagka-college, they go to a public school, a public university. But not all are so fortunate. So yun ang gusto nating i-maintain, yung complementarity. And ang susi niyan, one of the more important solution is really to review the employment process in the public sector. Kasi ang private, they make their own decisions. So thank you for that question. Maraming nag-a-apply, mapapagod na sa kahintay. Mag-abroad na lang, magyaya na lang sa abroad, tapos bugbugin naman sila pag pumupunta sila sa ibang bansa dahil pinagbibintangan sa COVID, or they are exploited in the so-called exchange programs. Narinig ninyo yung kunwari mag-exchange program, magturo for several years, pagbalik mo, wala ka ng babalikan na position. So, marami pa talagang dapat gagawin, and hopefully, the next administration will take time to take a look at these very important concerns. Hindi lamang yung curriculum is important, but also the employment process, the personnel process, and how to speed up the need for different kinds of teachers, different kinds of staff. Thank you for your question.
Maraming salamat po.
Ganda ng question ninyo. Gusto po worried kayo about the time. Ako, maski hanggang bukas, nagigising na ako, gising na. Pwede hanggang madaling araw, kagabi, inabot ako ng 3:00. So, patagalan tayo, tingnan natin.
Secretary, just to mention lang on the same question with respect to the private schools, we are maintaining the level of support to the private schools with respect to our continuing programs for the voucher program for senior high school students, which is a support to both the learners and of course to the enrollment levels of the private schools in senior high school. Plus, we also have support for junior high school, similar support for learners, and meron din doon for teachers. So, I think we have endeavored to retain the level of appropriation for that expenditure item. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Secretary, and of course, Yusek Nepo. Thank you, Sir Jong, for that question. And our last question, Direk Nina?
Yes, dahil ginaganahan pa si Secretary Sir Loy, bigyan pa natin ng isa pang katanungan. Tawagin po natin si Miss Glory Balegan ng PTV Cordillera.
Magandang hapon po sa ating mga panelists. Yung question ko lang po, since nagno-normal na po yung situation natin and marami ng schools, nadadagdagan ng schools na nag-open for face-to-face classes, is there a possibility po na mai-open din natin yung mga sporting events like palarong pambansa, since for sure matagal nang hinihintay ng ating mga student athletes ang mga ganitong klase ng activities po?
Yes, ako naman ang mag-volunteer. Si Lola na naman ang mag-volunteer sumagot. Ipagpatuloy yan. Actually, gusto natin ipagpatuloy, except that we are adjusting yung mga sports na yung competitive sports like boxing, for example. Hindi na yan, hindi natin yan pinapayagan, no? Pero magkaroon tayo ng palaro. Asian Games for schools, pagpatuloy natin yan. Pero kailangan yung mga playing venues, yung nasa bukas, track and field, etc. So, padayon, to say it in Visayan, padayon, we're going.
Ma'am, may target
Tuloyan.
po ba
Oh,
tayo?
nandito pala si Malcolm. The target is now. We are proceeding, di ba?
Yung actual date of the palaro. Remember, before the onset of the COVID, the host of Palarong Pambansa supposedly was the National Capital Region. In particular, the national, in particular, Marikina City. Mag-host sana noon. But because of the COVID, it was suspended and postponed, no? So I think at this point, meron kasi tayong ma'am, meron tayong palaro secretariat. So ibig sabihin, it's not only DepEd, but also the secretariat is composed of officials from the ILG and of course DepEd. So it's a collegial decision when to start, but definitely with the new development that we are experiencing right now, no, insofar as COVID is concerned, definitely there are already plans to reopen, no, di Palarong Pambansa. But for the exact date, baka yun ang hindi pa natin kayang i-determine. Una-una, we also need to determine sino nga yung region ang ready to host the Palarong Pambansa. So, kasi nga, there will be adjustments, not only in terms of the programming, but also in terms of the, anong tawag dyan, yung mga venue natin. Baka it will not be the same Palarong Pambansa that we have experienced before. Diba? Yung opening day natin is really a grand opening, no? Grand parade na lahat talaga nandoon. Baka ito yung mga bagay na kailangang i-adjust natin. So, to cut it short, wala tayong definite date pa. The Palaro Secretariat will decide on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Secretary and ASEC Malcolm. And thank you as well to Miss Glory of PTV Cordillera.
Yes, Direk Nina. Nina. We are ready in car, ASEC Malcolm, to host a possible palaro. Joke lang.
Tumingin sa'yo si
Tumingin
RD.
RD. Okay, so marami pong pwedeng pag-usapan ba?
Yes, Baguio was a very strong contender.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Diba? I remember.
Yes, ma'am. It was Baguio and Benguet, and Benguet now is completing an internationally international standard na sports complex that will complement the sports complex of Baguio City. So anyway, ang dami pong napag-usapan. Yan po, pag DepEd, ang dami pong pwedeng pag-usapan. But of course, we have to say goodbye for the press conference proper. We'd like to thank our EduAKSYON officials, si Undersecretary Ma'am Ann Sevilla, who is with us online, Yusek Willie Cabral also, and we also have Director Mark Bragado, and of course, Undersecretary Nepo Malaluan, Sir ASEC Malcolm Garma, and of course, our Regional Director, Ma'am Estela Carino. So thank you so much to our panelists today. Thank you so much also, Direk Nina, for being with us here in the Cordillera region. At balik sa inyo, Miss Elaine and Sir Frank.
Alright, maraming salamat din sa inyo, Director Nina and Sir Loy, sa pagsisilbing moderator sa ating press conference. Maraming salamat din sa napakaliksi nating butihing kalihim, Secretary Leonor Magtolis Briones, at sa ating mga undersecretaries, assistant secretaries, at of course, sa ating Regional Director, Estela Leon Carino, at sa ating mga kalahok ngayong hapon, ang ating mga Schools Division Superintendents and Assistant Schools Division Superintendents.
Ayan, so muli maraming salamat sa ating mga media partners na ating katuwang sa lahat ng ating advokasya. Maraming salamat po. Nais din naming pasalamatan ang mga kasama po natin sa likod ng kamera, ang ICTU ng DepEd Regional Office at SDO Baguio City and Public Affairs Service sa pangunguna ni Director June Arvin Godoy, at ang buong DepEd Car family para sa matagumpay na programa ngayong araw.
At syempre, pinapasalamatan po din namin ang mga tumutok sa ating Facebook Live at ang ating mga Division Information Officer at School Information Coordinators. Muli, ito ang EduAKSYON, aksyon at solusyon para sa edukasyon.